25 years old. I'm finally moving out. Technically, this is the second time I've moved out of my parents' house. I tried college for all of 6 months before dropping out and moving back home. I spent the next few years picking up odd jobs and languishing around the house. Now, I finally have a healthy mix of earning, loans, and inheritance that will allow me to start renting a broom closet-sized apartment in the middle of town. The past few days have been spent rummaging through boxes, taking a trip down memory lane and seeing if there was any part of my childhood worth salvaging, worth bringing with me through the next chapter of my life. I dragged an old, dust-covered cardboard box down from the attic. It had my name written on it in Sharpie. My mother's eyes lit up when she saw it. She explained that it was a box of cherished memories. Mementos from when I was younger. I opened it up and we both spent the afternoon looking through its contents. An old teddy, a jar of milk teeth, an art piece or two, and countless other sentimental knickknacks. At the very bottom was a leather-bound photo album. On the front was written, "First 7 years." My mother took it out and placed it gently on her lap. She started skimming through the pages, staring lovingly at each faded Polaroid picture of me. There was one of me at the park, one at Chuck E. Cheese on my 6th birthday, crying in the embrace of some furry mouse. My mother found one particularly cute. She slid it out of its plastic cover and handed it to me. It was a picture of me when I was 7. I was covered head to toe in a nasty chickenpox rash. To cheer me up, my father had stuck a dozen or so red circular stickers to my favorite teddy bear so I didn't feel alone. I smiled at the picture, its colors already beginning to dull. I asked my mother if I could bring it with me, and she said of course. A few weeks later, I was fully moved into my new place. The walls were damp. There was a peculiar mold spreading behind the radiator, and my next-door neighbor would play classic at an absurdly high volume in the early hours of the morning. Apart from that, it was perfect. I was renting, sure, but it was some place I could call my own. And I didn't bring all that much, nothing that I couldn't fit into 2 boxes. For furniture, I had a mattress, a poorly constructed IKEA bookshelf, and an old oak closet that my mother made me bring. I think she was just trying to get rid of it, to be honest, judging by the noticeable wood rot. I'd finally finished unpacking everything, and was going to throw the boxes away when I noticed something lying at the bottom of one of them. It was a Polaroid. I picked it up and held it in my hands. I stopped what I was doing and fell back onto the mattress, staring at the picture. There was something about it. As I looked at it, I got a nagging feeling that I had forgotten something. I was 7 again. I remembered back to the night before I got the outbreak of chickenpox. I already felt ill. Not a rash yet, just a stomachache and a mild fever. I had woken up in the middle of the night. My parents slept in separate rooms, and my mother's was directly across from mine. Every time I felt ill, or just had a nightmare, I would go into my mother's room to find comfort. This night was no different. Creeping through the dark corridor, even only for a split second, took some building up to. I remember standing in the darkness of my room for what must have been 5 whole minutes before finally being courageous enough to open the door and step out. I did, and quickly made my way into my mother's. I walked to her bedside, put a gentle hand out her shoulder, and shook her awake. Dazed, she asked me what was wrong. I explained to her that I was sick. She sighed in a loving way and let me clamber into bed with her. I remember how comforting a mother's embrace is. It's like all the ills of the world just melt away. I stayed there for a minute or two before she asked me if I was feeling better. I told her I did, and she sat up in bed, handed me a glass of water she keeps by her bedside. Once I finished it, she told me to go back to bed. She said that she would pop in 10 minutes to check on me. She kissed me goodnight, and I made the traitorous journey back to my room. I jumped into bed, making sure to keep a fair distance from the floor so nothing could reach out and grab my foot. I tucked myself in and waited for my mother to come in, see if I was alright, and hopefully to tell me that I could stay off school tomorrow. Just as I was about to turn around and finally go back to sleep, my door opened. I turned around but couldn't make out who was there in the darkness. As the figure came closer, I was sure that it was my mother, not that I could see. She didn't say anything, but neither did I. She stood over my bed and did nothing. She stood there for maybe a minute, although I can't remember it clearly. She didn't move a muscle while she stood there. All I could hear was her breathing, which seemed raspy and labored. Then she reached her hand down and brushed it against my cheek. My face was peeping out from just behind the quilt covers, and I felt like retreating further behind them when it touched me. Her hand felt cold, so cold. As quickly as my mother came in, she left. I heard her move away from me, but I couldn't be sure, as it was almost pitch black. I was peeved that I didn't get my usual kiss on the cheek, but nonetheless, I turned over and let sleep take me. Come to think of it, I never heard my bedroom door close again. The next morning, I got up for my usual breakfast of Cheerios, starting to feel itchy as the chickenpox took full effect. I sat at the kitchen table, and my mother slid a bowl of cereal in front of me. She saw how irritated I was and poured me a glass of water. Accompanying it was a small white pill, some mild painkiller, I assume. But back then, I thought all pills were a cure for something, so I quickly took it. My mother realized what was wrong with me and rang the doctors, arranging a checkup for that afternoon. She sat back down next to me and took my free hand in hers. She told me with a smile that I could forget about going to school today, and I beamed back at her. The kettle whistled, and she got up to pour the tea. Her back turned. She told me that she had to apologize for something. She assured me that she meant to check up on me, but she fell asleep right after I went back to bed last night. My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the Polaroid in my hand, the memory suddenly as vivid as the day it happened. My mother hadn't come to check on me that night after all. So, who had? A chill ran down my spine as the realization set in. I had always believed that it was her in the room with me, but the more I thought about it, the less certain I became. I could still feel that cold, unfamiliar touch on my cheek, the way it made my skin crawl, even though I wanted it to be comforting. I shook my head, trying to brush off the unease that had settled in my chest. It was just an old memory, distorted by time and a child's imagination. I was alone now, in my own place, and the only thing that I had to be scared about was missing rent. I placed the Polaroid on the small bookshelf, leaning it against a stack of books so I could see it from where I lay on the mattress. The faded image of my younger self smiled back at me, oblivious to the strange presence that had visited that night. I turned off the light and crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, just like I used to. The room was quiet, save the muffled sounds of my neighbor's music seeping through the walls. I closed my eyes and tried to shake off the remnants of the memory, reminding myself that I was safe. The past was behind me. Just as I drifted off to sleep, I felt something. A hand, ice cold and skeletal, gently caressed my face. I sat bolt upright in bed. I flailed around in movements that could be vaguely described as self-defense, but my hands hit nothing. I grabbed my phone and turned on the torch, lighting up my room. I was alone. There was no boogeyman to be found, and I laughed at my own stupidity, at letting my imagination get the better of me. I got up and walked to the little bookshelf. I picked my picture and stared at myself smiling, thinking that despite it all, I really haven't changed much since then. That's when I saw it. Standing just behind me was something that hadn't been in that Polaroid this morning. You see, there was a woman draped in stained rags and rotting, half covered in underexposed shadow. Her hand was brushing against my rosy cheek. I dropped the photo to the floor. My breath faltered as I turned around and collapsed onto the mattress. I wrapped myself in the duvet and tried to go to sleep. I ignored what I had just seen. I ignored the sound of my closet door creaking open.